Nick Abbott on LBC.
Hello and welcome to my show. This is Nick Abbott here, and I'm leading Britain's conversation with you until 1 AM. So, what we're going to talk about today, hey? I've decided to talk about Storm Desmond. No! Scientists say that Storm Desmond is partly due to climate change. Isn't that a surprise?
No.
They say man-made climate change was partly responsible for Storm Desmond's torrential rain, which devastated parts of Scotland, Lake District and Northern Ireland.
Oh no!
The researchers at Oxford University and the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute calculated that climate change had made the flooding event 40% more likely, with the estimate of the increased likelihood ranging between 5% and 80%. Woo! That's a huge difference. But apparently, according to them, it's due to man-made global warming. So we must be able to do something about it. I mean, it's our fault.
Yeah.
So let's read on. In this Guardian newspaper, who is, by the way, centre-left. The increase we found is small but robust, said Dr. Friedrich Otto from the Environmental Change Institute at Oxford University. 10 years ago, we could never make a link to climate change with a specific weather event. Now we can do it in real time. A positive attribution for an extreme rainfall event like Desmond is still rare. Storm Desmond dumped 341 millimetres of rain in Honister, Cumbria within 24 hours.
Oh, fabulous.
This may be verified as a national record where more data is received next month. When more data is received next month, I do apologise. More than 5,000 homes across the region were flooded and 60,000 were left without power. Oh, blimey. The research has been submitted to a journal for publication next year, but is not yet peer-reviewed. Also showed that it is now more likely for such an intense rainfall to occur again, closer to 1 in 70 years than 1 in 100 years. I didn't even know we had 1 in 100 years, let alone 1 in 70 years. The analysis showed that climate change has affected the risk of floods in northern England and southern Scotland. But the scientists cautioned that risk is also affected by exposure and vulnerability, such as the quality of flood defences.
Help.
And we know who's been making cuts to the Environment Agency, who are responsible for the flood defences, don't we? George Osborne. No one likes you, George, still. The analysis of a single extreme weather event was possible in Britain because of the existence of detailed climate models and regional maps, but it is still impossible to tell whether extreme weather events in the most developing countries can be attributed to climate change.
What the hell is going on?
In the last month, more than 300 people died in Chennai, India, as a result of extreme rains and flooding. So there you go, people. The complete and utter evidence that climate change is to blame for everything. Am I right?
No.
Okay, I also have detailed files on other elements of Storm Desmond, so let me just go get them. Okay. Storm Desmond has left thousands of people without power and wreaked wreaked havoc in parts of the UK.
Oh no!
Sorry about that, guys. David Cameron said,
Want to score some pot?
the flood defences in Cumbria were not enough, and some people might not be home for Christmas. You know what that tells you? David Cameron does not have faith in his own agencies. Am I right?
Correct.
So, maybe we should stop making these atrocious cuts to vital agencies which stop our businesses from getting destroyed and prevent people from moving back into their houses, because otherwise people will hate you for it. Sorry about that. Storm Desmond lashed parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, Southern Scotland and especially northwest England over the weekend, and more heavy rain is expected this week. Just to let you know, this is an out-of-date newspaper, but it does provide the correct information about Storm Desmond, which we will need to. Well, let's say carry out this investigation, shall we? Let's have our own little investigation on the Nick Abbott Show. The devastation has resulted in criticism of the government after multi-million-pound defences built following floods in Cumbria in 2005 failed to keep the deluge out from people's homes. Oh, not going well for day here, isn't it? During a visit to Carlisle, the Prime Minister said that flooding was absolutely horrific, and he promised to re-examine Cumbria's flood defence plans. Mr Cameron, who chaired a meeting of the government's COBRA Emergency Response Committee on Monday morning, said the government would fully reimburse councils for the cost of dealing with flooding. Do you know what this is? This is called short-termism. He didn't want to invest in flood defences back then, and now he's suffering the consequences. Well, I must say, it wasn't him back then, it was... Oh, who was it? I think it might have been Gordon Brown. Or maybe Holy Tony. The immediate response had to be to find alternative accommodation for those who had been flooded out of their homes and help with their insurance claims, he said. But I think you'll find that many of these people did not have insurance on their homes because of the extremely high insurance rates. After every flood, the thing is to do is to sit down, look at the money you're spending, look at what you're building, look at what you're planning to build in the future and ask, is this enough, he said? No. I don't think it is. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accused the government of failing to do enough to tackle flooding, and you know what? I think he's right. Last year, the Prime Minister promised that money is no object in dealing with flooding itself.
Oh, fabulous.
Itself a consequence of the destruction of our environment. But this has proved to be yet another false promise. In the last Parliament, the government slashed spending on flood defences before the 2014 winter floods. Liar! Making a statement in the House of Commons, Environment Secretary Liz Truss praised the work of the emergency crews, with some travelling from South Wales, Somerset and Lincolnshire to help. She expressed with her deepest sympathy to all those affected and said there had been a number of weather-related deaths over the weekend. Okay, so let's have an analysis of these floods then. The ferocity of the storm and the sheer volume of the rainfall have inevitably raised questions about whether global warming has exacerbated the risk. The answer is not straightforward. Scientists shy away from blaming any particular weather event on climate change, but they also point to a basic physical property of the atmosphere. The warmer air can hold more moisture. And what causes this warmer air? the El Nino effect.
Correct.
El Nino is a term to describe the biggest fluctuation in the Earth's climate system and can have consequences all across the globe.
Oh no!
It sees changes in the sea surface temperature of the tropical Pacific Ocean, which occur every few years. So, you must wonder, what causes El Nino? These events are due to strong winds and extensive interactions between the ocean and atmosphere. Widespread changes in the climate system that last several months, which can lead to significant human impacts affecting things such as infrastructure, agriculture, and health. Gosh, I think my voice is going. The name El Nino nowadays is widely used to describe the warming of the sea surface temperature that occurs every few years, typically concentrated in the Central East Equatorial Pacific. La Niña is a term adopted for the opposite side of the fluctuation. This sees episodes of cooler than normal sea surface temperatures in the Equatorial Pacific, and this is why we've been experiencing the warmer temperatures, which can be linked to Storm Desmond, although scientists, as I just said, have linked Storm Desmond to man-made climate change. These episodes alternate in irregular interannual cycles called the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which is the term for atmospheric pressure changes between the East and West Tropical Pacific. El Nino has impacts all over the world and can increase the risk of colder winters in the UK, although this winter we did experience a rather mild one, didn't we? So what have we learnt from this podcast? We have learnt that El Nino is having effects all around the world, and let me just list some. Severe droughts and floods triggered by El Nino, which has been one of the strongest El Nino weather events ever recorded, have left nearly 100 million people in southern Africa, Asia and Latin America facing food and water shortages and vulnerable to diseases such as Zika, UN bodies, international aid agencies and government has said. So already we have linked El Nino to the Zika virus, because of course the Zika virus is believed to be also transmitted by mosquitoes, and mosquitoes love the humid weather. New figures from the UN's World Food Programme say 40 million people in rural areas and 9 million in urban centres who live in the drought-affected parts of Zimbabwe, Mozambique, South Africa and so on will need food assistance in the next year. In addition, 10 million people are said by the UN's Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, to need food in Ethiopia, and 2.8 million need assistance in Guatemala and Honduras. Almost 1 million children are in need of treatment for severe acute malnutrition in Eastern and Southern Africa. 2 years of erratic rain and drought have combined with one of the most powerful El Nino events in 50 years to wreak havoc on the lives of the most vulnerable children, said Leila Garagazulu Pakala, Southern Africa Regional Director of UN Children's Agency UNICEF. Governments are responding with available resources, but this is an unprecedented situation. The situation is aggravated by rising food prices, forcing families to implement drastic coping mechanisms such as skipping meals and selling off assets. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. So thank you for listening, and this is my Hump Day update, and I'll see you on Friday evening. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation, with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekdays 7 till 10 on LBC.
Hello and good morning. This is LBC and you are with Nick Ferrari. I'm looking at the Zika virus, which has been a pressing issue in Brazil and parts of South America, as I'm sure you all have heard about it. The Zika virus, for anyone who doesn't know, is transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which also carries yellow fever. Some people are calling Zika a pandemic because there have been multiple cases of Zika throughout the world, apparently including the UK. I don't think that Zika is a pandemic. All this talk about it being worse than Ebola and how it will affect millions. It's pretty much false. Let's take a look at the actual facts. A variety of number of cases have been confirmed by many newspapers, such as the Daily Mirror, who have apparently confirmed that the Brazilian government have reported 450,000 cases. This is a wild exaggeration from the facts I'll mention later. The symptoms of this disease aren't serious enough to go to hospital. The symptoms may include conjunctivitis, headaches, and rashes. Not only that, but the symptoms last for up to a couple of weeks, and then you become immune to the disease as a whole. As according to reports by the CDC. The CDC have also released an article stating that we do know that the Zika virus can be passed from a pregnant woman to a fetus during pregnancy or at delivery. What we do not know is, we do not know how likely she's to get the virus. We do not know how the virus will affect her on her pregnancy. We do not know how likely it is that Zika will pass to a fetus. We do not know if the fetus is infected, if the fetus will develop birth defects. We do not know when in pregnancy the infection might cause harm to the fetus. We do not know whether her baby will have birth defects. We do not know if sexual transmission of Zika virus poses a different risk of birth defects than mosquito-borne transmissions. I think this really shows the level of understanding we have towards Zika, although we have to acknowledge that the Zika cases have definitely increased from 14 confirmed cases in 2009 and roughly 3,000 confirmed cases and another 150 presumed cases in 2016. This is because 4 out of 5 people with the virus don't notice anything. We also do not know that the Zika causes microcephaly, and I do stress this. But we have seen the trend in microcephaly cases rising during the Zika virus cases increasing. So overall, we see that the Zika virus is quite a mysterious disease. We have very limited information on the topic. So a lot of you may be asking, why is there so much attention on this? It's mainly because millions will be travelling to the Brazilian Olympics, and many public officials are worried that our British tourists will bring back the disease with them on the way back home. So now you have the information. After evaluating the situation, I ask you, this is what you should do. Call in at 0345 6060 973 and tell me your opinion. Personally speaking, the first step to dealing with the issue is to actually know what to do. I mean, we can't cure something we don't know all the information for. I mean, I understand all they're doing prematurely, such as fuming the area, but I personally believe that more effort should be put into actual researching. And unfortunately, time's up, but still tune in for James' show after the break. This is LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Steve Allen. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into LBC. I am your second presenter, Steve Allen. Let's get right into the first story. Tasmanian bushfires will be the first topic for today. And believe you me, if you think Tasmanian bushfires would look nasty, take a look at Hounslow. Pfft, my days. Anyway, let's get straight into it. Just a small tip before we start. Tasmania is in Australia. It also has lots of trees. Just because I know there's always those 1 or 2 thickos out there who listen to me. Anyway, It is a 3-hour, high-torturing climb to reach Tasmania's highest point. Ancient rainforests flank the slopes, and in years gone by, springs and streams have gushed from the soaked highlands above, feeding all greenery to be seen. The track passes Norm Spring, from which local legends hold its good luck to drink, but in these parts the luck has run dry. Pfft, what bimbo wrote this? Instead of talking about the beautiful trees and all that Macintosh, why didn't you just go and help the bloody people? Stevie boy, relax. Okay, sorry guys. Anyway, let's just cut to the statistics. Last year, Tasmania suffered its driest and hottest spring at the nearby Miana Dam. October's rainfall was just 10.2 millimeters, a record 65 millimeters below average. The second driest November followed. Now, how accurate is this? Because, you know, some newspapers do such and such and are biased, you know, like, depending, like, of the location, and some, like, racial and all of that stuff, because you can never trust newspapers these days. It all depends on, like, the amount. I know this sounds really bad, but the amount of casualties and such. Anyway, 13th January, a huge lightning storm set more than 70 fires rampaging across the island. Whew, that's a lot of fire. For more than a month, fire has rolled back and forth across the fragile plains. Only in tiny pockets has some life survived due to some inherent extra wetness, a protecting rock or random swirl of the wind. Sorry for my English, by the way. When vandals of Islamic State blew up the temples of Palmyra, the sickened world responded with an appropriate and universal rage. The Director General of UNESCO, the UN body that oversees World Heritage, called it a war crime. As the burning of Tasmania enters its 6th week, UNESCO remains silent. Well, UNESCO are a bunch of bimbos, aren't they? They don't respect the plants that give them the air to breathe. According to one estimate, 4% of the world's remaining pencil pines, among the longest living of all trees, have been lost in these blazes. Away to the west, fire still burns to this day. Tasmania's fire service said that they are contained. Thankfully, though they failed to produce the dire northerly buster that would have sent the fires deep into the wilderness. Damage has been limited to 22,000 hectares of the 1.5 million hectare park. That's a lot of land. UNESCO says it's not a position to speculate about the extent to which global warming is responsible for this particular fire. Earlier this month, the Tasmanian Premier, Will Hodgman, attacked activists for almost gleefully capitalising on the fires, which he said were naturally caused. Well, hang on a second. I thought a minute ago UNESCO remained silent on this topic. Okay, that's it. I think we can all agree who the real bimbo is here. See, this is what I mean when I say news reporters are biased. Okay, that's enough of that. Time to get to how all this happens. After the old Alan Meister is quite a smart guy after all, you know. Okay, the Alan Meister thinks this is a reasonable time to get out of third person now and just teach his amazing words of wisdom to all these bimbos out here. Bushfires can occur in one of two ways at any given time. This is by either man-made effects such as lightning, hitting a bushfire, although you would have to be the true king of bimbos to do that, or by a lightning storm, which is what happened here. So once the combustion of the bush starts, it's exposed to any other greenery around it. Hence, a bushfire starts. Plus, since the Tasmanian forest is around 1.5 million hectares, and about a minimum of 100 lightning bolts can strike the planet per second, I think you can figure out the rest. Anyway, that routes to the first topic. Time to move on to the final one by me for this podcast, which is the New Delhi water shortage. So, Delhi faces a water crisis after caste protests ended in rioting and arson on Sunday that shut down a key supply and killed 12 people. Oh, blimey. There must have been some real numpties out on the roads on that day. Thousands of troops with shoot-on-sight orders were deployed on Saturday in Haryana state after week-long protests turned violent, with rioters setting fire to homes and railway stations and blocking highways. Delhi's Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal, announced water rationing throughout the city and said all the schools will be closed on Monday to conserve supplies. New Delhi gets about 60% of its water from the neighbouring state, so at least the kids get something out of it. Am I right? No, in all seriousness, I couldn't do that, not one bit. The Jat rural caste is leading the protests, demanding quotas be set for Jats for highly sought after government jobs and for university places. CASE members say that they are struggling to find places despite India's strong economic growth, where they clearly chose the perfect time. What dotards? I'm sorry, but it's true. JAT leader Jaipal Singh Sangwan said they would decide on Monday whether to call off their protest. Well, you do that, good sir. No, I'm kidding, you blimmin' idiot. In my opinion, now is the wrong time to be throwing tantrums, especially throughout a goddamn flood. What a bimbo. Probably even more of one than the contradicting news writer that we were talking about on the first story. To carry on, shots were again torched on Monday, and protesters carrying weapons rampaged in the streets despite the extra troops, many of whom were sent into the state trying to increase the violence. An AFP photographer said he saw mobs, some armed with swords and sickles, running through the streets in Rohtak and trying to stop the media taking pictures. What an experience he must have had. If I was with them, I would have wet my pants and absolutely legged it. Crikey. Jats are the single largest community in Haryana, with nearly 8 million members, and are traditionally a farming community. They have been angered by comments in recent weeks by a BJP leader who opposed reservations for them. Hundreds of trains in the state have been cancelled or diverted since Friday, an official said. 10 small and big railway stations have been burnt. These mobs set fire to rail engines and bogies, Railways spokesman Niraj Sharma said. A lot of people will probably be afraid to go on trains anyway, in case they run into one of those bimbo protesters anyway, so no real change has gone on there. Now, let's establish why droughts happen in India, even though at least 50% of you probably know. There's still those guys out there who didn't pay attention in geography class. I would call them a bunch of nutters after all, however I was one of them. Getting onto the matter, droughts happen, especially in India, due to the sheer lack of rainfall and water vapour in the atmosphere. Probably due to the amount of bloody polluting we do. Everyone just start actually putting your blimming hanky-pankies into the actual bin, and maybe we won't have a problem. Sheesh. Here's one that all you geologists won't know. The El Niño effect actually creates not only heavy rains, but also creates low pressure, which pulls out the dry air from Central Asia. Ha! Beat that! Okay, I bet I look like a complete bimbo now, as that was probably the most obvious reason, you know. But guess what? At least I had my few seconds of good time, and that's what counts. Okay, folks, I think that about wraps it up for me. Make sure to catch me next morning at 4 AM to 6:30, and check out my Twitter at Steve Allen's Show. Little cheeky plug there. And now on to my good friend Nick Ferrari.
Thank you, Nick. Now we move into the Southern Hemisphere with news concerning the Cyclone Winston, a Category 5 cyclone. That's the highest intensity a cyclone can reach, which hit Fiji somewhere around mid-February. Yeah, the 20th. Wreaking havoc on its islands, the most badly damaged of which is the 14 villages on Coral Island. The cyclone is now the most powerful storm to ever hit landfall in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, it'd have to be with intensity this high. Winds of up to and over 200 miles per hour hitting the islands. As of 4:49 AM on the 7th of March, a reported death toll of 40 is still rising as contact is being re-established with smaller, more remote islands. Now, Ewan Perrin, Fiji's Secretary for Communications, told The Guardian that many who died in the cyclone were hit by flying debris or were trapped underneath collapsed buildings. Imagine that. How horrible must that be? Anyway, according to the Times, the UN have confirmed that more than 300 islands were struck by fierce winds, which hurled down trees, destroyed power lines, and caused heavy flooding. The Prime Minister of Fiji, Voreqe Bainimarama, also talked of the damage. Homes have been destroyed, many low-lying areas have been flooded, and many people are left stunned about what to do. Many are without power and full access to water, and they're cut off from communication. I bet they are. I would be if I was hit by a cyclone that size. According to the Telegraph, around 80% of the country's population have been left without power, and all schools have been closed as many are being used as evacuation centres. So far, 8,000 have occupied these centres and are awaiting supplies such as water and food, according to the ABC. Currently, the police and the military are working in rescue operations and the general cleanup. Government agencies are also working to clear roads and restore power to homes in areas which have lost it. Good for them. The government has said that they have been sending boats to remote locations suffering from water shortages with urgent aid. The Australian government will also be sending over helicopters to assist in delivery operations, damage assessments and medevac. How nice of them. Civilians themselves are also beginning to recover and are rebuilding collapsed buildings. A Fijian resident who had to flee when the cyclone hit, Joe Sawailau, said, We don't have any other place to live, so I think we're just going to have to start from here again. The residents aren't concerned about their loss of belongings, they're just grateful to be alive. Joe in particular vows to rebuild their towns and villages again. If you wish to help out or want to donate, go to actionaid.org.uk. That's all from me, James O'Brien. Thanks for listening.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Thank you, Nick. Now we move into Southern Hemisphere with news concerning the Cyclone Winston, a Category 5 cyclone. That's the highest intensity a cyclone can reach, which hit Fiji somewhere around mid-February. Yeah, the 20th. Wreaking havoc on its islands, the most badly damaged of which is the 14 villages on Coral Island. The cyclone is now the most powerful storm to have hit landfall in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, it would have to be with intensity this high. Winds of up to and over 200 miles per hour hitting the islands. As of 4:49 a.m. on the 7th of March, a reported death toll of 40 is still rising as contact is being re-established with smaller, more remote islands. Now, Ewan Perrin, Fiji's Secretary for Communications, told The Guardian that many who died in the cyclone were hit by flying debris or were trapped underneath collapsed buildings. Imagine that. How horrible must that be? Anyway, according to the Times, the UN have confirmed that more than 300 islands were struck by fierce winds, which hurled down trees, destroyed power lines, and caused heavy flooding. The Prime Minister of Fiji, Voreqe Bainimarama, also talked of the damage. Homes have been destroyed, many low-lying areas have been flooded, and many people are left stunned about what to do. Many are without power and full access to water, and they're cut off from communication. I bet they are. I would be if I was hit by a cyclone that size. According to the Telegraph, around 80% of the country's population have been left without power, and all schools have been closed as many are being used as evacuation centres. So far, 8,000 have occupied these centres and are awaiting supplies such as water and food, according to the ABC. Currently, the police and the military are working in rescue operations and the general cleanup. Government agencies are also working to clear roads and restore power to homes in areas which have lost it. Good for them. The government has said that they have been sending boats to remote locations suffering from water shortages with urgent aid. The Australian government will also be sending over helicopters to assist in delivery operations, damage assessments and medevac. How nice of them. Civilians themselves are also beginning to recover and are rebuilding collapsed buildings. A Fijian resident who had to flee when the cyclone hit, Joe Sawailau, said, "We don't have any other place to live, so I think we're just going to have to start from here again." The residents aren't concerned about their loss of belongings, they're just grateful to be alive. Joe in particular vows to rebuild their towns and villages again. If you wish to help out or want to donate, go to actionaid.org.uk. That's all from me, James O'Brien. Thanks for listening.